Welcome to the Scaling Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Harper, and every business has a story, some that defy all expectations. Today's episode is exactly that kind of narrative. I'm talking to Jack Carr, who's my good buddy, and he's not your typical entrepreneur. He bought multiple businesses versus started from scratch, so he was in the kind of entrepreneurship through acquisition space.
So I bought a business in 2022 here in Brentwood, Tennessee. Rapid Response. It was doing sub 800,000, so about like 790 and change. Been growing it the last 2 years. We'll do 3.5 this year with a run rate of about 4. We've done 2 small acquisition tuck-ins and then a large plumbing tuck-in that we completed this year. So now we do HVAC and plumbing.
He came from the world working in Napa Valley wineries and then went into Bitcoin mining, and now he's leading HVAC and plumbing business. If you've ever wondered how successful entrepreneurs think and how they see opportunities that others don't, you're really going to enjoy this episode. I'm here with Jack Carr. We are going to be talking today about buying businesses, scaling businesses, home service businesses. And this is a podcast where we talk to acquisition entrepreneurs, founders, other entrepreneurs, just anyone who's interested in buying or scaling businesses. And let's get into it. Jack, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
This is cool. We're neighbors, so
yeah,
you know, we've talked before, and we finally have actually met up outside of Rand's meetup group. So this is really cool.
Yeah,
I'm excited.
Well, thanks for coming over.
Yeah,
this
of
is
course.
exciting for me because I was on your podcast.
Mm-hmm. A long time ago.
Like a year ago or something like that. Yeah, a lot's changed for us since then.
Everyone.
And we'll talk, a lot for everyone, which is good. So we'll get into that. For the listeners who don't know you, tell us about, what you do now, how'd you get into this business, and let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, so I like starting at the beginning just because it's kind of a fun story to tell. So if I roll it back about 5 years, so I've always had an entrepreneurial mindset, always. I used to run wineries in Napa. I ran 9 wineries, ops manager. We did everything except really making the wine and selling the wine, but everything else was under my control. Loved it. It was a great time, but then when I started having children and I started continuing on my life, I realized that the grind of that it didn't fit my lifestyle. I would leave before my son would go to bed, or I would leave before he'd wake up, and I'd get back after he went to bed. And I said, this is depressing. I want to see my children, or my child at the time. And so I was doing that, but I was also dabbling in some other things. So one of my first businesses was a Bitcoin mining server farm. I would drive over to Reno. I rented some space from a gentleman, and we set up 35 Bitcoin miners circa 2017. Exited that 2020, which was awesome, kind of right at the peak and valley of those peaks and valleys in Bitcoin. And then in addition to that, I was also running my own winery. So it was called Behave Winery, fun little winery, started in 2018, started running through 2020 through COVID, and we had that alcohol sales and shipment boom, right? Because everyone was stuck at home, people were drinking, they were ordering alcohol in. We were trying to, at the time, create something that was like seltzers did to the beer market. We tried to kind of steal a little bit from the wine market with a sweet flavored honey wines. They were really meads, but we could play with the wording because of the legality there. So we were called honey wines. Did well. I sold out. We made another batch, sold out, and made another batch, sold out, made another batch. And on that third batch, we had a raspberry dragon fruit, which was neon purple. And my winemaker didn't understand that when you're using heavy amounts of fruit in your wine to flavor it, that you had to kill the yeast in a different way. Or he had to kill, there's more yeast because there's more particulate. And so we didn't kill the yeast all the way. And so that business ended shortly after that with exploding bottles of neon purple.
Wow.
So that's my behind the scenes entrepreneurship was exploding bottles of wine, purple champagne shooting off in people's cabinets and Rolls Royces and cars. And, it was just a nightmare. So we had to shut the business down, unfortunately, shortly after that. But it was a great experience. We learned a lot through that process. Between that exit and another small exit of a mobile maintenance company, my wife and I said, hey, let's explore the United States. It's 2021. We said, I don't get to see my child at the time. Let's explore the country. So we bought an RV, sold most of the stuff we own. It's the typical story that you hear. And on the day we're leaving, my wife goes, I need to tell you something. I'm pregnant. And so the trip was like, okay, well, we'll still do it, but we'll just like condense it. And then we get about 2 or 3 states in. She goes, oh no, it's twins. So then it went from like, oh, we'll do 6 months to like, oh, we're only going to not do anything.
Yeah.
We're going to stop here in Boise. We had our girls, which are now 2 years old. So they're wonderful. They're healthy. They're happy. We're super pumped on that. But midway through that journey, I said, hey, I need to get back into doing something, right? This kind of traveling without a job just isn't going to work with 3 kids.
Right.
It's not going to fit in an RV. Like the lifestyle wouldn't work anymore. So then I said, okay, I want to buy something pre-built that is going to be somewhat recession proof, because it's 2021, 2022. We don't know what's going on. I'm always very risk averse when it comes to those kind of things. And so I said, I have a mechanical background. I'm going to do something that I always found difficult to do when I was running the wineries, which was HVAC, right? That was one of the only things that we subbed out was HVAC. I did my own carpentry, plumbing, but I couldn't figure out HVAC. So I said, that's a moat. So I bought a business in 2022 here in Brentwood, Tennessee, Rapid Response. It was doing sub 800,000, so about like 790 and change. Been growing it the last 2 years. We'll do 3.5 this year with a run rate of about 4. Trying to get it up to about 5 or 6 next year. We've done 2 small acquisition tuck-ins and then a large plumbing tuck-in that we completed this year. So now we do HVAC and plumbing. And that's where we are. That's my long-winded answer.
That's great. That's awesome. So tell me, how did you find the business that you bought? And then what was that process, that acquisition process like?
Yeah. So the acquisition process is so difficult for first-time buyers, right? There's just so much you don't know, and there's so many moving pieces. And so the first thing is, I mean, I went through hundreds of NDAs and CIMs and everything like that. And I want to let everyone know, like, that's normal.
Yeah.
Like, you have to understand the business model you want to be in. You have to understand. So when we picked Nashville to come to the Nashville general region, like, we had 4 regions we were open to. It was like Bee Cave, Austin, Nashville, Flagstaff, Arizona. Like, we had specific locations and criteria. But I always tell people, you have to either choose location or you have to choose type of business, right? You get one or the other when you're kind of just shooting, because the chances of buying one of the 12 businesses in a specific region that you want are just so low. And then why would they sell to you and not one of the other 12 businesses? Right. So you have to be very flexible, I think, with those things. But we chose Nashville. We liked the Nashville market. It was a growing market at the time, still is growing market, which is awesome. HVAC it's in the South. It does well, so we really love that. What was the question?
Yeah, no worries. So how'd you find the business, and then how long did it take you to negotiate the deal? And what were the terms, and what did you buy it at? Like, whatever you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, of course. No, I'm pretty open book with this stuff. So that's where I was going with that, was that the process of searching is a long and arduous one. And so we ended up doing a lot of CIM and going through and talking with brokers and networking and a lot of biz buy sell. Biz buy sell, not the best place, but what I liked from biz buy sell was the ability to meet and talk to brokers and get to know them on a personal level, and that's what we did. So I actually went through 3 LOI processes before landing on this one. Here in Nashville too. So like I flew out, we were living in Boise. I flew out 3 times to Nashville for 2 businesses that fell through last minute, and then one that we closed on. So it was an appliance repair company that's here, still doing well. Still talk to the old owner, really nice guy. And the HVAC business that we didn't buy out in Dixon, and then we closed on the one in Brentwood. So like it's a long process, and my advice to anyone looking to buy a business is you have to be on top of it. Like,
Right.
go out there, network with brokers, talk with brokers. They need to know that you're serious, that you are a serious buyer, because they get so many tire kickers that are wasting their time every day, all day. And so the ability to say, hey, no, I'm serious. I'm ready to close. I have proof of funds. Let's get moving. Find me something. Now they're on your team to help get that deal closed versus kind of the adversarial position. So that process to finding it took almost a year.
Wow. Okay.
Because I went through 3 different LOIs. Like, I was flying out. I almost got to the finish line on 2 separate businesses. And then the actual process to close with the SBA 7A was a 7-day process. Excuse me. Was it, or 7-day, 70-day process.
Okay.
It was about 60 to 70 days from start to finish. Very difficult, lots of moving pieces, making sure you have licensing and that you get the business up and running, but you can't do some of the things before some of the other pieces happen. So there's due diligence, and then there's going through and actually, getting a contract figured out. What is the terms of the deal? My terms were really simple. It was 3x, give or take, of what the SDE for the owner was. I think it was like 2.6x, actually, not 3. 2.6x multiple, which is way too high on a sub $1 million business for anyone listening. But you live and you learn. We had to grow out of that really quickly. So 2.6x, give or take, and like 10% seller financing. It was really basic. Most of my deals after the fact have been a lot more creative and complex. The first one was just like, hey, we need to get across the finish line, be in the industry, and then once you get in the industry, you have the ability now to be in the industry and like have those networking options and connections for different deals.
That's great. And as you've bought these other, you said 3, two tuck-ins and one like different service line. You've mentioned to me that M&A is like one of your favorite things to do now.
Yeah.
Like, and so my first question is, like, what do you like about M&A? And then I kind of want to like dig into some of those other deals and learn about how you kind of structured those. So like, what is it that you enjoy about the M&A process?
Yeah. So, I mean, I love M&A, like the ability to take this thing that doesn't fit. It's like a large puzzle, right? A large puzzle with a high amount of chaos, right? There's all these moving pieces, and to get it across the finish line and then to see what it actually does to your platform business is the wild part. So to touch on that, we bought a business probably 4 months after the first business that was a $600,000 top line revenue. The guy was leaving. We offered him a substantially lower amount than most people would. We got across the finish line, and the way we structured that business was a small upfront payment. So we'll just say $10,000-$20,000, and then a revenue share. So on that book specifically. So whatever that book generated, he would get 10% of that until we paid off the rest of the seller financing. We paid off that loan, the seller financing, in less than 2 months.
Wow.
Like it's
and was that the plan?
Yeah. I mean, so when I do tuck-ins, I say there's going to be about 80% attrition rate or 50% attrition rate. We lose 50% of the customers because they're friends or they're, a neighbor. But what we found is if you call them, you text them, you send them letters, you let them know about the merge, and you do it the right way. We even got him to leave us a voicemail that we put on the thing saying, hey, I've moved. This is the company that I've partnered with to help take care of warranties and do my maintenance agreements. Like they're a great company. They're going to take care of you. We found it was less than an 80% attrition rate. So we kept most of the customer base, which then allowed us to convert really, really well after the fact. So he also was focused a lot more on service. He would limp the machine's a lot longer along. So when we came, we said, hey, that's probably not the best option for you in the long term. And we were able to flip a lot of units right out of the gate, which then he got paid, we got paid, and it was a win-win for everybody. The customer got better service, in my opinion. So that creative aspect, though, is not like if we went into the first deal at $600,000 versus like $790, there's not much of a difference, right?
Right, sure.
But one of them we bought for we'll just say sub 50K, and one of them we bought for 2.16x of SDE. So, 600,000 give or take. And so like that's a huge difference,
Sure.
but we never would have got the opportunity to buy the second one if we didn't own the first one.
Right.
So it's one of those toss-up things where you have to kind of get into the game first by whatever means, and then you can play.
Yeah.
So.
And on the second tuck-in that you did, what was different about that one versus the first tuck-in?
Well, the nice part was we already had the playbook. I love
Right.
tuck-ins. So private equity doesn't want to touch them.
Yep.
Even solo operators don't really want to touch them because there's no systems in place. We actually don't want any of their systems either. I want the book.
Mm-hmm.
I want the 1 or 2 vehicles.
Yep.
And maybe 1 employee that's good.
Yep.
Like that's all I want.
Right.
I don't need anything. I don't need the GMB2 and the phone number. I don't need anything else.
Right.
So it's nice. It's easy. It's simple, right?
Sure.
I port the number over. I take the vehicle and then I talk to their customers. Like we do what we do best and give them great service. And then, so now we had the playbook on that. We knew, hey, we need to email, text, send a direct mailer. We know what we needed to do for porting the number. We know what we needed to do for getting the truck switched over. And that was like a 300,000 one-man shop. He was part-time firefighter, part-time.
Right.
Like it was really, we're buying a book.
Yeah.
And nobody else is interested in it. So we get it lower than traditional multiples you'll see. And it tucks right in. We keep most of the customers. Everybody's happy. So that was nice about the second one is I would do those all day long.
Yeah.
We see huge growth in our business through that.
That's great.
Mergers are a little bit more difficult, but
yeah,
I'm sure we'll get there.
Yeah. So those are HVAC. So you've got your HVAC line of the business, but now you've added plumbing just this year, right?
Yeah. So we did 100% year over year growth in plumbing.
That's great.
Probably about 70% organic, 30% through the tuck-ins, which was great. That's what we expected. That's what we want, is to show that, hey, we actually know how to grow the systems through we know how to grow the business through our operational systems, but we can also grow it through acquisition. So that's wonderful. We're very happy with that. And then we said towards the end of the first year, we're rounding out 1.5, 1.6. We are getting a lot of requests for plumbing. Like, what do? We either refer or restart. And so we said, hey, let's find the right individual who can start this and who can grow it. And that's what we did. We put one man in a van. We bought him all the tools and equipment he needed to run. And we started figuring out plumbing. That was October of 2023.
Okay.
And then we had the opportunity around March of 2024. Somebody came and said, hey, we have this business that does it was technically 2.2, but after we dug in about 1.8 of top line. They do about 50% remodel work and 50% service. Are you interested? And so I said, yes, let's move forward with that.
And that came from a broker?
That came from being in industry. All 3 of these came from being in industry.
Okay, just being part of your community.
Being part of
hearing about it, kind of off-market deals.
Yeah, I think back to your original question, I think one of the keys that people don't realize is all my distributors know that I'm buying businesses. Everyone I talk to knows that I'd buy a plumbing or HVAC business. So anybody in the industry that sits around me knows that I'm a serious buyer, and that if they bring me one, they will get a piece of that.
Yep.
And so that's what happens through all 3 of these deals, is that people have brought me these businesses because they know I'm interested and I close.
And so you structure a referral deal for someone who brings you do you mind sharing what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. So on like one of those small tuck-ins, it's a couple $1,000s, depending on how big it is.
Right.
And so we give them a couple $1,000, say, thank you for bringing this to me. One of them came through Facebook Marketplace. I saw that he was selling a truck with the sign on the side. I was like, hey, you selling what are you doing with the business? And he goes, oh, I was just not going to do anything with it. And I said, well, I'll buy this from you. He's like, well, what do you want? And I said, I'll give you a couple $1,000 and for the truck and a couple $1,000 after the truck. So I bought the truck. I bought the book for a few thousand more. It was a $250,000-$300,000 book.
Yeah.
That I bought for $3,000-$4,000.
Wow.
Just because it was Facebook Marketplace.
That's crazy. Like, you can find deals anywhere, but I think what you're talking about, where getting involved in your community. I mean, we tell our franchisees that is like, if people know who you are and what you do, they're gonna call you because they like you. And I mean, that's how we found the Rolling Suds deal.
Yeah.
Is through the community of the franchise community and people that I've known for years that trusted me, and they're like, no, you got to talk to Aaron, because if you want to do what you want to do, you need to talk to Aaron. But had I not had those relationships and that really truly kind of relationship capital, even, it'd be really difficult. We wouldn't have had the opportunities we've had.
Yeah, I'm introverted by nature.
Yeah.
Less so in front of cameras, but so it's a very difficult thing for me, though I know that it's probably the most important thing that you can do for your business and for like the acquisition space is talking to people, calling brokers, going online, having those discussions, having those cold emails, cold DMs, is just saying, hey, what are you doing with the business? Because there's so many people that, including like my father-in-law, I've talked to him. He shut down like a $10 million GC company in Lake Tahoe, Nevada side, incline. He just shut it down. I said, why did you not sell that? You can't sell that business. And I argued with him for about a year and a half over it. And I just said, okay, you win. You can't sell it. But, a lot of these folks don't realize as they're going towards retirement that there's a value, there's an intrinsic value in those connections, in those books, in the vehicles, in the employees, in the systems that they build.
So you bought the business, the first one at, what'd you say, $790. You added a 300 or 600, 300, and then a 1.8 plumbing. So one of the most challenging, you read this and you see all this with different people talking about kind of that $1 million to $3 million size is like one of the most difficult points in business, because, so can you talk about how you, like, a lot of people, it's really hard for people to get out of that range. So how did you, do you attribute it to the acquisitions? Do you attribute it to something that you guys did tactically? Like, talk about that.
I'd actually argue and say, for those who don't know, we also run, Aaron said it, he was on our podcast, Owned and Operated, which the original focus was how to get past 5, because 1 to 5, in my opinion, is what we call owner's hell, right? You don't have enough capital to compete, to advertise, to hire infield managers. Like, there's just no money there to do it and sustain yourself, but you need to be able to get past those points. So one of the options to be able to do that, right, is, in theory, you could just go out and buy a $6 million business, right? You just buy your way through those kind of steps, which I think is, in my opinion, it's a very chaotic way to do it, but it's a way to do it, and it's less grindy. It's more instantaneous chaos that you have to build your systems, right? You break everything, all your systems, and you have to rebuild them really quickly, or otherwise you falter. But like, if you purchase correctly, you buy businesses correctly, and you do proper due diligence, you can mitigate enough of that yes, it's still chaos, but it's mitigated by, hey, I didn't break the bank to get there, because there's going to be unforeseen financial costs to actually merging those businesses together. So long story short is you can easily not easily, if you have sourcing, you can easily buy your way through.
Just above 3 million or 4 million or 5 million.
Yeah.
Just buy
your way through, right? Because you're essentially, if you do it correctly, you're buying your way past those stepping points. The other part is, like, really just grind and put that time and effort in and get creative, because I think that even though that 1 to 5 is owner's hell, because you don't have the ability, what you do have is the flexibility, right?
The
scrappiness, which is what we train that muscle all the time. So a great example of this is, like, one of the $100 million companies, they're not going to go around to every HOA in your area and sponsor pool parties for $200 and then go and hire somebody to talk to the people of the community and network and be, but I can do that. I have the time. I like going to pool parties.
Yeah.
Like, I like the community. It's easy for me to send off emails and do that. And so it's this kind of scrappiness and really in-depth community that you need to do. Like, we sponsor the football team locally. We're going to do some fun things next year where, our tagline is nobody's faster. So we're going to do a raffle and race people. And if they beat us and they're faster, then they get a prize, right?
Right. I love that.
None of the $100 million companies are doing that because they don't need to. Right. They just $10 more into the Google machine and $100 comes out.
Yeah.
So, like, they don't have to do that. But for me, we do. And so there's a divide there that if you get scrappy, guerrilla-y, you can actually win that game. So that's the only way to get past 5, because it's not money, it's not capital. You're going to have capital problems at all times. And so, I mean, once again, there's ways around that. You could raise, which we've talked about.
Yeah.
Raising's a really easy way to now not have that capital issue, and then you can buy your way through. You can buy businesses through SBA 7A or get really creative on financing. You've heard me talk about revenue share agreements. I love revenue share agreements. If I win, you win. If your book is as good as you say it is, you win. We pay you out in 2 months, whatever you wanted as a portion of revenue.
Right.
And we eat that for whatever time frame that we set or limit. Or you just grind your way through.
Yep.
And you get there.
So you've got, at least what I've learned is you've got a lot of searchers that are looking kind of in this like 500,000 to like 1.5 million SDE business. And that could be in home services. It could be somewhere else. But obviously, like, well, the reason they don't want to go higher than that is because they're typically competing with private equity, because now you're in that 6 million, 7 million range where private equity can say, okay, I'm going to hire a COO or a district manager or someone and pay them 150, 200 grand a year, put them out there. So if someone is looking for that 500,000 million SDE business to buy, they still may be in that kind of 1 to 5 million range in top line. What would you recommend that they do? Maybe it's raise more capital. Maybe it's, have kind of what would you recommend they do so that they can get to this scale that obviously you're on your way to achieving? What are some things that they could do?
Yeah. So, I mean, the hard part is that what we've seen over the past 3 years, especially in the HVAC, plumbing, electrical space, is private equity is moving down market. They wouldn't 2 years ago, they wouldn't touch anything under $1 million. Now they're moving like to the 500,000 EBITDA, really? 300,000 EBITDA, and it's just because what we're seeing is like a squeeze of the middle. You have the solo guys in a truck who, they don't need to market. They have their word of mouth is enough. They're fine running it with maybe a helper, and then you have these big companies who have a ton of capital, right? So, for example, PPC doesn't work in Nashville in the home service industry because there's enough $100 million companies bidding those keywords that it's very difficult. Like, they're going for lifetime value rather than instantaneous value.
Right.
And so they can do that. But for me, I can't spend that much to try and acquire a customer just because it just doesn't make sense. I can't front that kind of money over the next 6 to 10 years. So to answer that, like, what should they start doing as somebody who buys a little bit smaller and tries to grow is, I would say that come into the business with a plan. Like, it's hard to give that generalistic advice because people are good at different things. Right. My background is operations, so I'm really good at running a company. I was able to buy smaller. So when sorry to go on a tangent here, but when I bought, everyone quit. My 3 people quit. Like, the nightmare scenario that people talk about, it's I bought the company, everybody quit. I already said I didn't know HVAC, but I was up at 3 a.m. every morning watching YouTube videos on refrigeration theory, and like my background in mechanical engineering and troubleshooting at the wineries. Like, I knew enough of electrical troubleshooting that I could step in, because 50% of the problems on an HVAC system are electrical. The other 50% are refrigeration theory. So once I learned refrigeration theory, I became a decent tech. The point is that that's my strong suit. Like, right. I have the mechanical know-how. I have the systems ability. I understand processes. But when it comes to finance, like, it's difficult for me. Yeah. I'm not the person going in and doing financial models, and like cash flow modeling was a big lift for me to figure out how to do that properly. And so depending on what your strong suit is, in my opinion, really depends on the way you go. If you are somebody who's really good at finance, but you need to spend a ton of money to hire a good operational person, maybe capital is the first thing you look for. Right. You come in, you raise a decent capital amount, you hire someone really good at operations, you run kind of the background services, financial, HR, whatever, and that's how you do it. You buy your way through, and you have a good operator.
Yeah.
But if you're better at operations, maybe you just try to grind your way through because you're really good at operations and you hire a marketer.
Right.
Right. So there's no one answer that fits
Yep.
all. It really depends strong suit of the individual.
And I think that's a really good point too, because a lot of the searchers that I've met, they're really looking at the financials. They're looking at the SDE. They're looking at what kind of multiple they're paying. They're looking at what the potential, but they don't maybe predict that their key employees are going to leave the day after
Yes,
they
day
buy.
one. Day one.
Like literally day one. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, this business I bought for 2.6 SDE was because these 3 people were going to stay for the next 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that like? I mean, like, how did you get out of that? I mean, that's a terrifying thing.
On one side, it was terrifying and it was hard. But on the other side, I'm kind of grateful. So I got to view my business from a point of view that many people don't, right? You buy a $1 million business, you're not going to run as a tech. You don't get to run the systems as a tech. You're not answering the phones while running calls to schedule and dispatch while you're trying to talk to customers. Like it's this process that you truly understand your business from the inside out that I would never have gotten to do. And, with that, I have a respect for technicians. I have a respect for my CSR dispatch team. I also understand like the workflow of you arrive at a customer's house. Oh, you say the wrong thing. And then now this, like the cascade of effects of what you're saying to customers, how you look, how you dress, and how that affects the process. And so, it is what it is. Theoretically, right, I maybe still would have been fine. It was 2022, and the labor market was at its, in my opinion, all-time worst over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Just like the hardest to find anybody, especially like how do you attract them to a very tiny company that's no benefits, no 401k, like there's nothing that I could offer them other than a bigger piece of the cash value of each job that they're running. So essentially a very entrepreneurial person and mindset. And so, I mean, those are the things you have to learn, though. It builds weird muscles. I try to associate it to working out as like our hiring muscle had to get really strong because if it didn't, like, I would still be one man in a van.
Yeah.
So, I miss those days. Sometimes it was simple. I mean, I was running calls on weekends. My wife doesn't miss those days.
Yeah.
My kids don't miss those days.
Yeah.
But it was simple, right?
Yeah.
It's like I ran calls. Every call I ran, I got to keep the money. Because it was just me. So like I understand the draw of it. Yeah. It was really nice. We looked at a business probably 7-8 months ago, and it was two men, their wives ran CSR dispatch. The 2 men ran all the calls, and they made 1.7 million a year.
Wow.
And they kept 60% of it.
Wow.
But like just because they paid themselves and like 60%, I said, man. And I've talked about this with John Wilson, is like he remembers too being a $3-4 million company, and the people running $1 million companies are actually taking home more. Yeah. But there's just no growth, right? There's no sustainable growth there. So it's like it's this very hard dichotomy of cash flow and versus pain.
I think that's also something that our listeners can take home with is like, when you start a business, whether you buy a business or start a business, like you're in there running a business. It's not like you just like buy a business and you hire an operator and then you go look for your other business. Like you're going to be on the truck. You're going to be doing that. I mean, when we bought, we acquired the Rolling Suds brand, like it was me, we had 2 employees and the 2 founders, and I had no idea exactly how many units we were going to sell or anything like that. And I was doing sales up until April of this year. I was doing the franchise development, the sales myself. And so I'd be selling from 7:30 in the morning until 6 at night on calls, literally every moment. And then in the morning before the call started, and in the evening after the kids went to bed, I was running the business. Yep. So it was all consuming, and we had explosive growth, but I was reinvesting everything back into getting more people and hiring better people. And so what was your team like then versus now? So like, what's your org chart? What did, like, tell me What'd your team look like then, and what does it look like now?
Yeah, so I was lucky. I was very lucky to have the community. I mean, I owe a lot to the Twitter community specifically.
Yeah, I want to talk about that too today.
Yeah, just because in terms of networking, and as a sub $1 million company, you don't have the money to do best practices groups. Like, it's not there. And so to have a community that you can actually bounce ideas and see business models and everything off of was important. And so one of my first hires it was me, a tech, somebody answering the phones, and probably my best hire was I put something into the universe on Indeed for a comfort advisor, a project manager, a salesperson, essentially commission only salesperson. Best hire. She still works with me today.
That's awesome.
And she has been the most pivotal hire of the entire company. One, because she worked at other companies, so she helped bring processes and like what it should look like. She's great at sales. It's somewhere that I lack. It's me knowing that I'm not good at selling to customers. And so putting her in that position, allowing her to spend time with the customers and truly give them the best value possible. And so that was one of my early choices that I made that put me where I'm at today. And then from there, it's really copy paste. If you are not trying to copy other companies, then you're creating the wheel for no reason.
Right.
So that's all we did is we said, hey, at what level should we be hiring these positions? And then we started hitting those levels, and we started putting those positions in place with a little bit of bloat, saying like, hey, we're expecting to hit this level, so we're going to hire a field manager to manage so that I can get out of the field. And it hurts. It hurts.
Yeah.
It hurts because we don't have, like, once you sit, like we talked about, it's owner's hell. So we don't have the money to hire a field manager, but you have to be able to grow. So
right.
Keeps it tight.
And your team now with all 3 HVAC companies and 1 plumbing company, like, is there a district manager, general manager? Are they territory based? Like, how does it work?
So it looks like we have a general manager / operations manager. We have an open position for a service manager for HVAC. We're expecting 4 HVAC techs, 2 install crews, and then we have our project manager, comfort advisor, who essentially manages a little bit of the installation. So almost like an installation coordinator / salesperson.
Yep.
And then on the plumbing side, we have a field service manager who manages the entire division, 2 service techs, and then 3 installers.
Cool.
And then we have, CSR, 2 CSRs, 3 CSRs now, 3 CSRs, a separate dispatcher, and then an HR / recruiter / office manager / just like everything that I can't do during the day.
Cool. Awesome. Well, before we get into capital raising and kind of what's next, I want to double click on the community piece. I think, at least for me, business ownership, like, I would be nowhere without the community that I have. And a lot of that has come from Twitter, but for me, it's also come from the franchise community, because there's just a bunch of people that have done the thing I'm trying to do before that I can call on. So when did you start to get involved with the Twitter community? I know content has become a big piece for you guys, and the podcast, and that's kind of taken off. So I want to kind of dive into some of those topics before we get into capital raising.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm extremely passionate. One of my things is I need to give back to the community, which is why I started doing podcasts and doing owned and operated and everything like that, is because when everybody quit on me and it's just me, I'm trying to figure it out. Like, I bought this thing. I'm going, excuse the language for your audience, but oh shit. Yeah. I'm going, oh shit, I bought this thing. I have a PG on my rentals in my house and like my life. Like, what did I do?
Right.
And I'm reaching out and like, I'm just going to say some names. Like, I'm calling Sam Leslie and going, dude, I bought this thing and I'm wondering if I made a mistake.
Yeah.
Like, I need help. How are you pricing this? What's your price book? Like, what does this cost? I'm calling people and going, hey, this is a job. I have no idea what I'm doing here. Like, I'm running into this issue. Can you help me? And the Twitter community rallied. Like, everyone I called took
That's awesome.
my thing. Still to this day, like Rich Jordan and John Wilson and Kylon and Keegan, and just like everyone, all my friends who own HVAC companies are from Twitter. Like I talk to them more than probably my actual friends. I don't want to call actual friends, but more than my historic friends.
Right.
Just because they're in such similar situations and we're all going through the same stuff daily. And so when I got into the community, I was reaching out and I said, hey, how do we help other people? Like I got lucky enough to be in the Twitter community. I grew enough of a following that people actually would take my calls as I was doing things. But there's so many people out there that are in that 1 to 3 million and they're like, I don't know what to do. They're in the same position.
Yeah.
I said, so how do I help? How do we help? Because they can't pay for Nextdoor. They can't pay for Certain Path. They can't pay for SGI. They're all too expensive. The best practices groups. So how do we help? And so John reached out to me. It's like, Jack, I have this podcast. Like, I don't know what to do with it. Do you want to focus on this? And that's what we did. It's like, how do once a week we get people together and other owners and ourselves, and we go, let's get really tactical and break this down for people. Like, why do you split CSR dispatch? Let's do an hour on that.
Right.
And it at least gives people a framework. There's so much nuance in all this stuff that we're not really afraid to give it out.
Yeah.
But at least when you have the framework, you can try to figure out that nuance independently. But you can't do that if you don't even have the framework.
Right.
So like that's the key. That's the goal. That's why I do this. Is I want to give back because I wouldn't be where I'm at today. I don't think I'd have a company today. It probably
Without the community.
Yeah. So that's how vital it was to me, and that's why I want to give back to. So like, reach out to me if you are on Twitter. Reach out to me. I answer almost every DM. I'm not stingy with information. I'll give you the playbook. Like it really is a all ships in the harbor rise together type of deal.
And for those who are in the maybe follow the SMB community, the ETA community, but they don't have a following, or they're kind of like on the outside, but they're looking in, how can those people get involved? I guess, how did you make those relationships with some of the people that you talked to? Did you just start messaging them and saying, hey, how can I add value? Or what did you do tactically?
So one is I just asked for, I think the first thing that people need to realize is there's so many people out there that are just talk. They just talk, and they talk for years and years and years with zero action. Right. So the first step is actually doing something, making steps towards doing whatever you want to do, whether it be buying a franchise, starting a company, buying through ETA, like whatever it is, just do it.
Right.
Like make a intentful step towards it. What does that mean? That means, okay, I went ahead and scraped every biz buy sell listing, and I have an entire portfolio of all the biz buy sell listings, what they're trading at. Do they include real estate? Like that's something I did. And then I offered it for free. I said, anybody who wants this, take it. And that got me probably 1,000 followers when I did that. But it was an idea that I was like, hey, I need this because I want to understand the ETA community better, and like what's out there on these marketplaces, and what are they trading for? Like what multiple should I be buying businesses at? But so one is I'm doing something, and then two is I'm trying to provide value back with what I'm doing.
Yep.
That being said, though, reach out.
Yep.
Like you can't get a no unless you actually try type of deal. So just ask. I mean, people jump into my DMs. Hey, do you have time to talk? I'll be honest. Yes, I do. No, I don't. Generally, it's almost always yes. I talk to people all the time and try to help them because, once again, it's what I'm passionate about. I'll probably do it until it starts interfering with my actual business. Mm-hmm. But 30 minutes here and there every day is something that I'm willing to, pay it forward.
It's great. And I love that the podcast that you guys created was predicated on this idea of like, how can we help at scale? Because I do think that's probably a big part of the reason why the podcast has become so successful. So can you talk about when you guys started doing the podcast, kind of what your vision for it is, and did you see it taking off as much as it has, or talk about kind of the evolution of your content journey?
It still feels unreal, to be honest with you. Like somebody walked into my office 6 months ago. It was like they took my card and they left, and they walked in and they went, HVAC Jack, like from owned and operated. And I went, Yeah. Yes. This is weird. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a Z-list celebrity. I don't, like I said, I'm introverted. I don't like this. I hire people to do sales because I don't like talking to people.
Yeah.
But honestly, like that was the initial goal. And I think that we're doing a really good job at kind of working towards that goal, and providing our listeners and our community with a lot of value. And that was the goal from day one. I feel like it's going in that direction. And so with that, people have seemed to just resonate with, right? Really, it's I mean, we knew it was I'm going to call it a product. We knew it was something that people needed because I needed it.
Right.
I needed it. John remembers needing it. And between John and I think it's a really good mix of somebody who's been there and somebody who's like proof of concept, like
Right.
actively building in the space.
Yep.
Not that John's not actively building. He's just actively building at like a different
building
level.
at a much different
At
level.
like
yeah.
a different level.
Yeah.
But the time horizon on something like that, what people don't realize is the time horizon is like 8 years.
To get to from 3 to maybe 30. Yeah.
3 to 30 in 8 years. And like we were talking to Ishmael down in Next Gen down in Southern California, and he's building these companies, and he's building them, HVAC and home service companies, from 0 to 40, 100 million in 7 years.
Is that Valdez? Is this?
Yeah, Valdez.
Yeah.
And he's building $100 million companies in 7 years.
That's insane.
And so like the time horizon on getting to these kind of really points, it is actually much shorter than I think that even I realized. Like it's not inconceivable to say that next year you could do 100% year over year for 6 to 7 years. Yeah. Like it really isn't that inconceivable as long as you're doing the right thing, playing the right playbook, and really grinding. Yeah. I think that when even though John's playing on a different level, he remembers like it was 3 years ago. Like it was, and that's the cool part about like this podcast and our podcast is we have Rich Jordan on a bunch. Like I listened to Rich Jordan's 2021 episode or 2020 episode, and he's like 4 million. He's got all these crazy ideas. He's trying to figure it out. And then you talk to him today, and like half of the ideas stuck, half of them didn't. But now he's like, I'm 14 million or 15 million in 2 years, 3 years. And it goes, wow, like that's the time horizon. It's like you can get to financial independence in a 3-year time frame by making the right decisions in the right market. And I don't think it's lost on those guys. Like they're still the same guys that they were 3 years ago. They're just playing at a different game now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, let's get into some tactics about capital raising, which was initially what you reached out to kind of talk about my experience, and maybe just to paint a picture for the audience, like what's next and what are you trying to accomplish and to kind of accelerate that growth. And then let's get into just like tactical capital raising stuff.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. So one of the areas that in all my businesses, I've never done is raise capital. Everyone's been bootstrapped. I've taken the money from another one and put it into another one, and like this perpetual build of real estate and Bitcoin and all this kind of crazy stuff. But we're at a point in rapid response in the HVAC business where I'm going, we can survive running 10% EBITDA and we can continue grinding, but 10% EBITDA on 4 million is 400,000. Right. You want to grow to 8 million next year. Like, what does that lift look like to get there? And what it is it's more than 400,000. It's like every penny goes back into the business. And you have to be very careful with your cash flow, because the cash flow cycle it can be ruined by, hey, we went out and did $50,000 in work for a property management company. Well, they're a 60, 90 day net. Yeah. Now my cash flow cycle is completely messed up and I'm behind on all these bills. Like, you can really shoot yourself in the foot. And so when I reached out to you, I said, hey, what does a raise look like? Because the biggest problem right now for me to get to from 4 to say 10 or to 20 is like it can be condensed down to capital. Mm-hmm. And I think because as we mentioned on the time horizon, I think that our goal is 20 million by 2030. And I think that's easily achievable with capital. It's a little bit more difficult, probably a smaller version of that, maybe 10 million by 2030 without capital. And so I'm trying to figure out where we want to end up and how we want to do it, and is a raise a good idea? And so when I reached out to you, I asked you, what did that look like?
Yeah. Well, for me, I had never raised capital before.
Same boat.
Yeah. So same exact boat. In fact, I had never acquired a business before. I had never structured a deal like that. So I kind of went a lot off of gut. I said, okay, this is where I want to go. This is what I know the value that I could create is if we do what we've done before with other brands. I modeled out, what I thought I needed, and then I added additional cushion to that because business always costs more money than you think it's going to.
So can I stop you
Yeah,
there,
please
though?
stop me
like
whenever.
that was an important part that I kept running into is like, how much?
Yeah.
How much do you raise? So I'm just going to throw numbers out there. These are not my numbers. I'm just throwing them out there for your listeners. Like $1 million. Why do if I wanted to go raise $1 million, like that's probably how much I need to get to 10 million.
Yep.
Right. And then I can do the modeling, but realistically, I don't need $1 million tomorrow.
Right.
I only need 300,000 to get me through the next year. But then if I want to do the same kind of growth the year after, I have to go back and raise 300,000. So like, what was the decision on going back and re-raising versus initial raise?
So this was one of the best pieces of advice. One of the best pieces of advice that I received was, Aaron, raise the least amount of money that you need to get you to that next phase of growth, because you can always raise more money. And so the reason for that is basically you give up the most equity, which is the most valuable thing you have in your business, when there is the highest risk. And so while you may be giving away a percentage of your existing business, what these people are investing in is this future business and this future size that just doesn't exist yet. And while you've proven that you can acquire businesses and tuck them in and really get to some significant scale relative to 2021 to now, going from 1 million to 3.5 million is very different than 3.5 million to 20 million. So an angel investor, that's kind of what they're doing right now, is really investing at this pre-money. It's not pre-money, but it is pretty close to that evaluation level.
It's like between seed and A.
Yeah, it's
right?
Definitely between seed and A. And so if you raise $1 million, you might give up a much larger percentage of equity now versus if a year from now you put 300,000 into the business, you have more proof of concept. So now you can raise again, but give away less.
That makes sense. And it makes sense from like a numbers perspective, right? Because if your valuation and their risk tolerance now would be less than, you say you took a third of it, 333,000, and you didn't grow to 10 million, but you grew to 5 or 6. Your 5 or 6 million value is now more. So if you do need 300,000, right, it would be a smaller chunk. If you gave away 10% the first time, the same amount of money would only be worth 5%.
Yep.
So now you're 15% in instead of 20%. And so you saved yourself 5% just by raising in pieces versus in the whole on the first. That makes sense. I was living under the impression that, dude, just raise one big round and then call it a day. Like that's all you're going to need. But it makes more sense to raise in small chunks. It's probably easier for investors to stomach as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, and there's like way creative deals you could do with your investors to decrease the risk for them. So like, I didn't know the difference between a Class A share, a Class B share, a Class C. Like I didn't know what a
waterfall action.
I didn't know waterfall. I didn't know liquidation preferences. I didn't know like none of that. Like it was actually funny. Like during that time, so it was about 2 years ago to the like now of when I was structuring the deal, and I had advisors, I had the founders of Rolling Suds that I was negotiating with, I had lawyers, I had their lawyers, and they were all speaking. It was like they were all speaking a completely different language, and it was like being dropped into the middle of like Vietnam in the middle of the forest and like not knowing the language at all, and no one speaks English, but I got to figure out how to eat. Like that was what capital raising was like for me. And it was absolutely an awful experience. Like, it was miserable.
You know, as we go through, it sounds a lot like the 7A process. Is like there's chaos on all sides and you don't understand what's going on and what piece comes first or second, but you just got to get through it and figure it out.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, honestly, that's what I love is once you come out the other side, it's like I could walk somebody through the 7A process like that.
Yep.
And I'm sure same with capital. You could walk someone through the capital process, at least a decent portion of it.
Well, now I know, I mean, I'm not like a pro, but I'm definitely know like very specific tactics. So like, I'll give you one example you could use. You could go to your investors. Well, actually the two of the best pieces of advice that I got was the one that I told you, which is raise the least amount of money that you need in order to get you to that next phase of growth comfortably. And then the second was to raise smart money.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of dumb money out there, especially in home services. You get hit up by private equity companies. I want to give you this amount of money, but like they don't add any additional value other than capital. And if that's the case, you just go get another loan and or you do something and you do debt financing or you do a convertible note or you do something like that. And I raised smart money. So people who could provide additional value, intellectual capital in addition to actual capital. So what you could do is you could say, hey, we're going to do a capital call in a year because I know that this $333,000 will get us to that next acquisition or will get us to that next phase of growth. But at that valuation, a year from now, because you invested now, we want to give you 80% on what the valuation is at that time. So now they're incentivized to write another check. You've already got the relationship with them. The capital raising, at least structure, is already determined now. Mm-hmm. So at that point, they get to buy into more equity. Let's say your valuation at that point is $9 million, but they get an 80% discount on that investment. And now they're like, oh, okay, like, yeah, I'll write you another $150,000
Yeah, I get a deal,
check.
right?
I get a deal because,
deal.
and so they feel comfortable. You could also do liquidation preferences where they get, first money in on the waterfall with a pref, like all those different kinds of things.
Darn. We talked about it before, yeah, because I don't think we'd ever move into a preferred return from like a profit sharing, just because we're such a short time horizon. Like I was saying, 5 years is the difference between like 1 million and 20 million. So it doesn't make sense to pull money out to pay investors back when at the end the equity is so strong. So with that though, right, a hard part when going through the 7A process or any kind of these processes is figuring out who you need in your corner before you start.
Yes.
Right? So like, do you need a lawyer? Do you need an accountant? Who's the resources that you need to put under retainer, and how much does that look like before you even start this process?
So
at the beginning stages, at least.
Yeah. So you need an attorney that has experience leading and executing angel/seed rounds for businesses. Like, it's a very specific niche, and you want to ask that attorney, like, what are some deals that you've done that are similar to this one? And you could even say, I'd like to talk to that person to get some diligence on it, because the wrong attorney could really put you in a difficult spot, because so much of the deal is based upon what the attorney suggests you should do. And if they have experience negotiating with startup founders or acquisition entrepreneurs that want to do tuck-ins and bolt-ins like your situation, then they can share their experience. And I'm sure there's like a ton of people on Twitter that you can interview and stuff like that. But that is a really important piece. And then the additional piece is you do need a CPA that knows how to make sure that you're not paying you're not going to get hit with a massive tax bill.
Yep.
And so those two things are really important for me.
And so was that one of the first steps, is you went out there and put both of those people on retainer with your own money, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I did, which makes investors feel super comfortable. So what you can do when you start paying for things that are specifically as they're associated with the raise is that can come out of your investment into that next raise. So like by the time that I had gotten to the finish line, I was already doing a brand refresh. I was hiring marketing agencies. I was spending all of my time. I was doing I was basically acting as if I was the CEO of Rolling Suds before we even acquired the brand. And I had invested a little over $50,000 of my own money. And so what we did is we just said, this is money that is going towards my raise. And the other thing is, if you work with angel attorneys, they won't get paid until the deal closes. So instead of writing them checks constantly, they're like, and what I did with ours is I said, listen, I don't know how long this process is going to take, but I know exactly how much money we need to raise. And if this deal with you gets out of control, it's going to mess up what I'm going to use the capital for elsewhere. So I need you, based on your experience, to give me an amount that this is going to cost.
Yeah.
And if it goes above that, we're going to have a huge issue. And so we basically...
Not to exceed.
Correct.
NTE, yeah.
So the deal went on longer than both me and the attorney thought it was going to, in terms of like some back and forth with their attorney and just some really annoying stuff. But they still kept it as close to that number that they gave me initially, because you can rack up some legal bills.
Oh, yeah.
Like you can rack, and they're incentivized to literally keep billing you per the hour. So, So that was one thing with this attorney that I worked with. A, they had worked in angel rounds, and that's what their specialty is. And B, they were able to say, when the deal closes, this is how much you'll pay me. But if you start writing checks or spending time or using resources to go towards this new business that's going to get to $20 million, all that money can go towards your investment. So what I was going to say at the beginning is like, it makes investors feel more comfortable if you're investing alongside them versus like, hey, I'm going to get sweat equity because I'm the operator and doing this. Like, obviously that's the case. Like, I'm the majority shareholder in Rolling Suds, but I also have the same liquidation preferences and the same stuff as those angel investors. And I'm the biggest investor in Rolling Suds. And like, so that makes them feel a lot more comfortable. So I was able to get checks and wires sent quite quickly, A, because of the reputation that we have in the franchise industry, and B, just because like I was putting my money where my mouth is.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good advice, I think, for everybody out there, right? Yeah. And my only thing that I want to mention to anyone listening about attorneys is I love working with attorneys. They're good people, very smart, intellectual people. I want to be clear with something with your audience and with anyone who ever listens to me. At the end of the day, you are solely responsible for whatever's in that contract.
Yes.
You know, I know you're saying like lean on your attorney, which I fully agree.
Yeah.
Like lean into your attorneys, but that doesn't abdicate.
Abdicate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
I'm pretty sure that's the right word.
Yeah, it doesn't remove you from ownership of like extreme ownership of what's ever in those contracts. Like
Totally
you
agree.
need to be the person who understands every single paragraph and line. That has saved me more times than I can. As somebody's gone through 4 APAs, like it saved my butt.
Yeah.
So I'm very passionate about that. But that aside, my big warning off my pedestal. What was your pitch deck like? So I know the answer, but like, I need to know how and like how did this work, man?
So, what's a pitch deck?
Yeah, the answer is there's no pitch deck, and I know you told me that, but that doesn't even make sense to me. People are just like, "Hey, Aaron, here's some money, no reason," because you said it's going to be good.
So, I don't know that this is the right way to do it. This is just the way I did it. I spent hours, probably hundreds of hours, on a model, a base case, best case, and a worst case on what happens if we sell X number of franchises, we get this many open, they start at this much revenue, they increase, and I did that for 5 years. And so I understood that model like it was the back of my hand. And I understood it so much that no matter who I spoke to, I would be able to defend what I had built.
Yeah.
Now, anyone can make anything work on a spreadsheet. And so that can only go so far. So really what capital raising is selling investors on this dream that you have. And the reason why it's so hard is it's like, you're like, no, I promise this thing exists. And they're like, but it's not there. And you're like, no, I promise it is. And so you have to basically, as the founder, the entrepreneur, you have to convince them in this dream that you have. and that they're going to get a significant return on their investment, given the risk associated with it. And so there were a couple things I did. One was understand the model and make sure that I could talk about it.
Did you at least present them with like a one-pager then?
No.
You just talk. You were just like, "Hey, I need to talk to you for an hour. Here's what it's going to look like. Remember these numbers."
So what I did,
maybe that's the right way to do it. It's like, hey, it just lives in their head now.
More or less. So I basically said, all right, the last brand I worked on, we added 223 locations in a 2-year time span for this other business. I'm utilizing the same exact relationships as I did in order to scale that business. And the enterprise value that I increased that company by was over $80 million in 2 years.
Yeah.
And I chose investors who have experience in the franchise industry, who have scaled businesses and understand what 223 locations in 2 years for a brand means.
Yeah.
Right. And then I picked a number that gave them theoretically could be a 10x or more return on their investment. And what someone told me is investors at an angel round want to have the opportunity to at least earn 100% of their money that they invested every 12 months. And so that'll really help you think about how much money to raise too. Mm-hmm. Because if you think about a business that's at $20 million that you want to build and an exit, and you give someone 20% at $1 million invested right now, like they want to earn that $1 million back every year until you sell the company.
I think that helps though on a valuation standpoint too, like wherever you're asking versus valuation versus, your time horizon, right? That's what it comes down to at the end. So that's really good advice because it helps get you into these ballparks. I think that you don't know.
You don't know.
You just don't know.
You're making it up.
That's why I came asking you, because I was like, I just don't know. Like, what is the rule of thumb? And given rule of thumbs are just general rules, but realistically trying to at least be within the ballpark, I think, is important at the end of the day.
Yeah, and like I said, it'll also help you realize how much you want to raise, because it's about how much you're going to give away at a potential liquidity event. The other thing that I recommend that anyone who's raising capital does is create urgency. I see these capital raises get like caught up for a long period of time. Like someone's like, oh, I'll think about it, blah, blah, blah. You have to create urgency around the raise. So what I did specifically is I went to someone who I knew she had just sold her business. There's no way she could have deployed all that capital in the time that she had just sold that business. It was at least a $60 million exit, probably more than that. And she believed in me and told me, Aaron, if you ever do anything, like, I want in. So I called her and I said, hey, before I go to the investors that I've already had deep conversations with this about, based on your belief in me, I want to give you the opportunity to invest alongside me. Here's how much I'm investing in the business. And this is the max amount that I'm giving an individual investor to invest. And here's the least amount. But I need to know if you're in or out.
Why did you put a max amount on there?
Because I didn't want someone saying, I want all of it if they can't provide. So I had very specific investors that have very specific levels of value. So I have one investor who's really good at PR, marketing, and sales and runs the biggest PR agency.
So really the smart money piece, like you were very intentful about who you even offer to, that's interesting.
They all have different skill sets. I have one who has a background in legal and M&A, and then I have one who's both on the franchisee and the franchisor side and has over 1,000 restaurants. But this woman I knew was going to be the most silent out of all of them. But you're creating a waterfall. Mm-hmm. And so I said, this is the minimum, this is the maximum, because engaging for anything less than the amount that I told her wasn't worth my time in terms of talking to lawyers and stuff like that. And I had a very stringent timeline on when I needed to get it done by, because come hell or high water, we were taking the brand to market in February of last year.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't care how we were doing it. We were doing it. And so she's like, she sent it to her lawyer, and her lawyer wanted to sit there and pick it apart. And she goes, no, I'm doing this. I just need you to read it and make sure that I'm not signing up for something scary. But other than that, like, bless it, but like, I'm sending him the money. And had I not created that urgency, she might have sat there and the lawyer might have charged her $600 an hour for the next month.
Yeah.
And so then when she had wired the money, then I called the other ones and I said, listen, I've got this much of my own money in. I've got this much of this other money in. I've got this much less left of the business to sell. This is the valuation. It's not a negotiation at this point because I've already got another person who's invested at this valuation. I can't give you a different valuation than I gave her. I need to know what percent of this that you want, and I need to know within the next week. And it was get in or get out because I had a timeline in wanting to get this done. And if you're trying to get a 5-year exit to $20 million, you also have a timeline. Yeah. And so it's as the person raising capital, it's your game. Mm-hmm. And that was something that took me a while to learn. Is I was at the beginning, I thought I was playing their game, but ultimately, like, this is your business. You get to set the terms. And that was a big shift for me. Because they know more than I do because they've done this before. Mm-hmm. So I was leaning on them. But ultimately, everyone's going to act in their own self-interest. Like, that's just human nature. And so as soon as I was like, this is my game, and this is how much of the business I'm selling, and this is at what valuation, are you in or are you out?
Yeah.
And
it's a yes or no, right?
Yes.
Makes it easy.
Yeah.
Because that how much and valuation and without caps and everything, that's what drags on.
Drags on forever.
It's, just disagreements and back and forth. So that's really good advice, I think. I mean, I'm at a spot where, I'm truly considering it, and I think that's going to help a lot.
So so you want to raise, you think you need about $1 million to get you to where you want to go, but probably 350 between now and the 12 months. Does that include cushion or does that not include cushion?
So those are just ballpark. Okay. Yeah.
But so is the number that you're going to raise,
so I think
including cushion or not?
My problem right now is that I haven't gotten in depth enough to where you're saying in terms of, right, I have my total number that I think I can get to the total of where I want to exit at. But broken up into smaller pieces, I don't think I need to sit down and actually model that out and be like, okay, hiring this position, and putting this much into marketing and this much into ops and vehicles and material. Like, I need that in the next 12 months, which will get me to X, right? And then add cushion. So I don't think I've broken it down because it's not going to be right over the next 3 years, per se. If it is the $1 million, it's not going to be 33.
Right.
It's more so going to be like, 450, 200, 200, or 120 or something like that. Like, it's not going to be linear.
Because also your business is going to cash flow more as it gets to a certain
So like
size.
Once you get from 4 to 8, right? If you're going for 24 to 8, like now you have a significantly higher level of cash flow.
Which means you need to raise less.
Because the cash flow is able to sustain the growth that you're putting through. So, and you could argue though that if you're trying to stay with that 100% growth, there's still like it's harder at 8 to go to 16 because it's 8 million in lift versus 4 million in lift. But still that the cash flow that's provided through the business. And then I think on the back end, the levers you're able to pull are less capital intense, right? Getting your operations streamlined is easier to do at 10 million than it is to do at 1 million because you don't have the managers in place, you don't have the systems in place. So being able to pull a streamlining lever is less costly than saying hiring a headcount.
Yeah.
That's very good. I love this. This is a good conversation.
Yeah.
So
me too.
let me ask you a question. This is out of left field. What is your goal with this podcast, right? So I'm one of the first couple, first few invites onto here. Thank you again for that.
Yep.
But what's your overall goal? You asked me why I'm doing why I'm doing it. Why are you doing this? You built this gorgeous podcast studio. There's art everywhere. This thing's badass.
Thank you.
Like, what's the long-term goal? There's definitely investment here.
Yeah. So this serves as both a podcast studio and then also a content creation studio. So we've got my content strategist Chase here.
Hey Chase.
And we've set this up. We've put a lot of time into it. I can come down here now and record 30, 40 videos in an hour. So we've currently put out at least one video on all platforms per day. We'll put out one podcast, we'll get to the point where we're putting out one long form podcast per week and then one long form YouTube per week. And this studio serves all of those purposes.
Yeah.
Now, specifically for the podcast though, my larger kind of mission is to help make franchise ownership, franchising in general, more accessible to your average, more mainstream, more accessible to your average person. Like before I got into the franchise industry, I thought franchising was just McDonald's, Popeyes, Chick-fil-A, like legacy fast food. I had no idea that there's 1 hour heating and air. I had no idea there was Serve Pro. I had no idea 2 Men in a Truck or 1-800-GOT-JUNK were franchises that people could buy. And learning that information has allowed me to build this incredible life that I have now that without the franchise industry, I wouldn't have that.
Yeah.
And franchising in general is a way for ordinary people to generate extraordinary wealth. There are a lot of operators and executors. There are very few inventors. Mm-hmm. And when you start a business like entrepreneurship is so evangelized with like Elon and Mark Zuckerberg, but like that's not your average business owner. Your average business owner is you, it's John Wilson, it's me. It's like people who have like they're just doing ordinary things really well. And franchising as in general gives people this ability to buy into a system that already exists. But in order to change your life through franchise ownership, you have to know what it is. Mm-hmm. And so my goal with this is to interview people who have started businesses, but also like make the franchise model just become more accessible and understandable.
Yeah, the irony of it, right, is I think about 20 minutes ago I mentioned, right, you pick up a framework and I got my frameworks from people on Twitter.
Yeah.
But ironically, right, if you buy a franchise, it comes with it.
It's literally part of the deal.
You don't need to go and figure it out through a what do you call it? What was I calling it? Like a Nexstar or a SGI. Like it's
part of it.
It's part of it.
And people pay a lot. I don't know what those cost annually, but
lots.
It's like probably 20, 30 grand a year,
yeah.
Right? So with franchise ownership, like a franchisor should provide call center, marketing resources, HR, like a bunch of different resources. But the biggest value, and I have no problem saying this because I've been in franchising long enough to know, is the community of people who are all doing the same thing as you. And theoretically, if your royalty only paid for the community of individuals, it would be worth it.
Yeah.
Now, that's not the case with a good franchise brand. Like you have a ton of resources, but part of my job as a franchisor is to help facilitate those interactions. So we have like Teams chats where franchisees are all day long. So they don't have to go to Twitter and say, how do I estimate this $40,000 job? Like, or like, gosh, which type of nozzle do I use? And
which kind of trucks do I buy? How do I,
And all of that, like really there's two major forms of leverage as a business owner. There's capital, which we've talked a lot about today, and then there's time. And every business owner is typically trying to use capital to get more of their time back so that they can eventually, ideally, have a business that can run without them. And then they can go start other businesses, or they can sell the business and get more money that gives them more time.
Yeah.
And ultimately, a franchise, you're using one form of leverage, which is capital, to get more of your time back. And sure, you pay an upfront cost and a royalty, but theoretically, the time you get in return more than pays for what that costs.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've never heard it put so eloquently.
Oh, thanks.
So, no, but it's good because I think that sometimes, like you said, when you think of franchise, you think of Wendy's and Popeyes and stuff like that. But I don't think that's a bad thing to think of it like that, right? When you're trying to wrap your head around the model itself, it's saying, hey, you get this, for lack of a better term, business in a box ready to go. we help you out. So you're not sitting here like Jack going, how do I find people and what kind of vehicles and where and who and what's the structures behind all these, and having to shoot in the dark and generate. You get that time back. You're not sitting in bed at 9 p.m. at night trying to come up with a new pay structure because half of your team quit because they don't like your current pay structure.
Right.
So it's all figured out for you. So that time becomes yours again, which is very eloquent.
Yeah. And I think what we're seeing, especially on the SMB ETA community on Twitter, is you're seeing so many people say, okay, I'm not going to graduate with an MBA and go work at McKinsey and then get into private equity and then, retire in investment banking with a portfolio of 1%. Like, that has always been the path, I would say, for like an MBA grad from Wharton or whatever. But now you've got them saying, hey, I'm going to go buy an HVAC business that's $1 million a year business, and I'm going to scale that, and then I'm going to do that. But ultimately, that's 2 years of your life. You said took a year to find the brand, and then you had to. So, like, the amount of time that it takes, like, if you really parallel that just side by side with a good franchise brand. Now, the good is a very important.
I wasn't going to touch on it, but I think that I'm glad you did.
It has to be
it
the
has
right
to be
brand.
A good one. There's a few that have really poor names.
Yeah.
But so tell me this, because I've always been curious, even going through like the acquisition kind of route, we run into franchises, and you're curious to say, well, why not, trying to go through that kind of playbook. What for people listening, what makes it good versus not good?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you have to believe in the team behind the brand itself, right? Because is the team going to actually take care of franchisees and focus on creating systems that benefit not only just the franchisor, but the franchisees individually? And that's going to take a period of time to get to know the team, make sure you believe in everything. Also, the resources that they provide. So is it just a logo and a truck? Or is it, hey, here's our 6 marketing vendors, and here's how they've produced leads in all of these different markets. Here's the call center, and here's what they're converting at on average. Here's the economics on average of our first franchisees. Now, that's going to be hard to get for an emerging brand because you don't have that
Fair
yet.
enough.
So there is a significantly higher risk in buying an emerging brand than a more established one, theoretically. But the way you mitigate that is you talk to the franchisees in the system and you ask them about their experience. Now, for us, and I think this is a major difference versus like some other, especially home service brands that I've either been a part of or been affiliated with, is we're super selective on who comes in. We do that for a few reasons. One, like, it's going to be a more valuable community for a franchisee the more selective we are about that, right? So we just talked about franchising, like the community being one of the most valuable things you buy. If I'm letting someone in who's just going to like run the truck by himself and buy one territory and like have a job, and I'm letting someone else in who has a $57 million a year business and he's putting this on his road to $100 million, those two dudes aren't helping each other, right? So if the less niche and focused we are on finding the right buyer, the less valuable the community is, and inevitably what will happen is the more failures that you'll have.
Is that common?
I don't want to talk badly about, but there
well,
are
I mean, you don't
a
have to
lot.
talk badly. I'm just saying, like, is that a common place to be choosy?
No.
Right? Because the intent of a franchisor is to get as many franchisees theoretically, right, from the business model. So being selective.
So it's really, I'll tell you this, it's very hard for someone to be selective that has never gotten involved in franchising before, because being a franchisor is incredibly capital intensive because franchisees need the most amount of help when they produce the least amount of royalties. And you're paying out a significant part of that upfront franchise fee in commissions, broker fees, marketing costs, and additional operational costs. So it's not a huge profit center. But when you're a brand new franchisor and you just need franchisees and you've invested $200,000 in all your documents and getting things set up, like, and you need to pay payroll and someone's willing to give you 90 grand, it's really hard to say no. Now, we went into this raising a significant amount of capital because we knew how selective we were going to be.
Yeah.
And what that's enabled our franchisees to do is have this community of individuals who are all really high level operators. Like out of the 50, well, we've got 64 franchisees, 14 of them are former C-level executives, probably an additional 10 to 15 are existing business owners or people who have sold businesses before. And then the rest are like high level 6-figure, employees.
Yeah.
We've got a professional poker player. We've got multi-unit, multi-brand operators, but like they're all very, like they can all have the capacity to build a big business. And really that's where the true value creation in a franchisor comes from, is long-term franchise fees or franchise royalties of operators investing and growing their businesses.
Well, I mean, I would also think too, like the enterprise value of the brand of Rolling Suds as a whole kind of relies on the individual operators performing at high level, right? Because if somebody's not doing well, it picks up a bad name. That doesn't hurt just the location or the region. That hurts the entire brand.
It hurts the other franchisees.
And it hurts all the other franchisees. So being selective sounds like a really good strategic play, but also from like a long-term growth perspective, sounds like the right thing to do from a branding method.
Our success is solely dependent upon the long-term success of our franchisees. Like the success of Rolling Suds does not happen without the majority of our franchisees being successful and wanting to grow their businesses. And that's how franchising should be. But going back to just someone not knowing about business ownership, following Cody Sanchez, following Alex Hormozi, like
cut this part. I don't want to be on their bad list.
No, but those people
Yeah.
want a business.
Yeah.
They want to buy a laundromat. They want to buy an HVAC company. They want to actually own a business, but they don't have a great idea. They're not creating the next Facebook. So what's the option? Well, the two options, or at least the one that's being presented most online, I would say, is go buy a business from a retiring boomer and
Just answer the phone and get off faxes.
Yeah,
and
just
you're good
get
to
it.
go.
Just replace the fax machine, install some follow up, and install a manager, and then do it over again. It's super simple. Then get passive income. It's easy. But truly, the desire to have a business, and those people, I would say the majority of them, don't know that franchising is an option. That's what I'm hoping that this podcast long term is able to solve, and really content creation that I do in general. And inevitably, obviously, like I'm here to make money. Like there will be people who will listen to this and say, hey, I want to apply to be a Rolling Suds franchisee.
Yeah.
Or Aaron decides to launch another brand. And then, we've got other people that want to join that, right? So
I mean, it makes sense as an emerging brand. Like this is a way to get out the story and the why and the how. So very neat. I mean, I love, like I said, I love the setup. It's cool. It's exciting. Well, because we were talking, speaking of Ishmael Valdez, we were talking yesterday, and he said something that hit home to me. And he went, the next 5 years of lead gen and kind of building your community is no longer going to be about Google, LSA, PPC.
it's not.
The years before that, it was commercials and radio and traditional media and billboards. He says the next 5 years is going to be people creating content. All the PPC, SEO, Google, LSA, it all goes away because of AI.
Yep.
And what we see is the emergence of people who have created content and who deliver value and entertainment is going to be the next 5 years. So I try to keep that in mind. I mean, right place, right time for me, but I mean, it's fun to be in this industry, or at least the media portion of this industry while it's growing.
And I could not agree more. I tell my franchisees that all the time. I'm like, listen, content creation, it's not going to be overnight. You make a video, you get 10 leads, but like we don't even send drip campaigns out because my social media is the drip campaign.
Yeah.
Because where do people spend time? They spend time on their phone scrolling.
Yep. They're not watching. They have the TV on in the background, but they're sitting here.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I saw a study. Q4 of Chili's or Q3 of Chili's, they attributed 40% of their growth to an organic video that wasn't from them, wasn't from an influencer. It was one girl who is eating something from Chili's, their triple cheesy thing, and she's taking a big bite in the cheese string. But and it got like 7-10 million views, something crazy like that. And they said they attributed 40% of of their income in that Q3 to just that video.
Yeah.
So it's crazy the amount of outreach that these videos and this content even unknowingly creates. So really excited.
Yeah. Well, awesome, Jack. Thanks for coming
Yeah,
on.
thanks for having me.
Yeah, where can people find you if they want to get in contact?
I love Twitter, guys, or X or whatever they call it now. Feel free. It's the HVAC Jack, or I believe LinkedIn is Jackson L. Carr. Find me. Come say hi. If you have questions, feel free.
Awesome.
Open book.
Well, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course.
See you next time.